1. Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Hi, I am Leone. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your neighborhood epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times. Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Hi, I am Leone. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your neighborhood epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
Episode 57 DHG May 5, 2025 via mental health care raises privacy alarms and COVID-19 misinformation. In episode 57 DHG 1 United States Kennedy Jr. disdain for science 2 United States horse statistics in honor of the Kentucky Derby 3 Oklahoma Lawton at this humble used car lot tariffs are beginning to sting for Nebraska why the Warren Buffett departure matters 5 Trump says he will put 100% tariff on movies made outside US 6 Will not you be my neighbor? No thanks Elon Musk residents of an upscale enclave outside Austin, Texas learn the hard way what it is like when a multibillionaire moves into the mansion next door. Some of them have started a ruckus over it. 7 California Los Angeles is this the late night TV last gasp? 8 United States Republicans in Congress use obscure law to roll back Biden-era regulations. 9 Europe makes a pitch to attract scientists shunned by the US. 10 Spain cable theft in Spain disrupts train travel for thousands. Officials say 11 United States ever worried about being laid off? Read this. 12 United States via mental health care staff crowded into federal buildings raise patient privacy alarms. 13 United States explanation from 2020 of why the myth, legend or rumor that MAGA still circulates that COVID-19 vaccines are harmful still lives on among certain groups. RAWSEP View Folklore is one explanation for the existence of Trump, MAGA and Kennedy Jr. MAHA COVID-19 misinformation, or the explanation more likely could be that COVID-19 misinformation is just be your basic Trump 1.0 lie and 2020 and your basic Trump 2.0 lie in 2025. 15 United States Elon Musk has Musk steps back. Experts say Doge cuts have harmed government services. The billionaire fired thousands of workers, but savings are minimal and offset by degradation of services. Critics say 16 Romania The Alliance for the Union of Romanians AUR of George Simion has grown from an anti-vax movement into the second largest party in Romania. The Romania Far right first round win of Romanian presidential election raises prospect of EU disruption. Trump admirer George Simion opposes Ukraine military aid and calls for Melonisation of Europe. RAWSEP View AUR growing from an anti-vax party to a MAGA-esque party shows the connection between Trump influence and anti-science and anti-vax movements. 17 Bosnia arrest explosive toys and cosmetics. The story behind the DHL parcels blot exclusive account reveals previously unreported details and insights into how the Kremlin sabotage campaign played out on the ground and the multinational effort to track down the network behind it. Main content. 1 United States Kennedy Jr. disdain for science accepted by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. Substack letters from an American. Heather Cox Richardson, May 4, 2025. The results of this disdain for expertise shows these days most immediately in the policies of Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services Kennedy Jr. as measles continues to spread across the U.S. A spokesperson for Health and Human Services said Friday that Kennedy Jr. will turn U.S. health agencies away from promoting vaccination, which is 97% effective in preventing the disease, and toward exploring new treatments for it, including vitamins. It is not that there has been a lack of studies. Dr. Michael Osterholm, an epidemiologist at the University of Minnesota, told Teddy Rosenbluth of the New York Times decades of research have not discovered dramatic treatments, while vaccinations have proven safe and effective at preventing the life-threatening disease. Rosenbluth noted that public health experts are baffled by the Kennedy Jr. decision to hunt for new treatments rather than endorse shots that have decades of safety and efficacy data. In 2025, the top health official in the United States, a man without degrees in either medicine or public health, appears to be rejecting germ theory and reshaping the U.S. medical system around his own dedication to a theory that was outdated well over a century ago. 2 United States horse statistics in honor of the Kentucky Derby. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. Substack letters from an American. Heather Cox Richardson, May 3, 2025. A piece written several years ago on 10 famous American horses. 7 Mr. Ed was a talking palomino in a 1960s television show by the same name. At a time when westerns dominated American television, Ed was the anti-western with the main human character, a klutzy architect and a hero, a horse that was fond of his meals and his comfortable life, and spoke with the voice of Alan Rocky Lane, who made dozens of westerns. But the show was a 5-year hit as it married the past to the future. Ed offered a gentle homely wisdom that enabled him to straighten out the troubles of the humans around him. The startling special effects that made it appear that the horse was talking melded modern technology with the comforting traditional community depicted in the show. 10 Secretariat was an American thoroughbred that in 1973 became the first U.S. Triple Crown winner in 25 years. His records in the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness Stakes and the Belmont Stakes still stand after Secretariat was stricken with a painful infection and euthanized in 1989. An autopsy revealed that he had an unusually big heart. Sports writer Red Smith once asked his trainer how Secretariat had run one morning. Charlie hadn't replied, the trees swayed. Headlines. The New York Times, May 5, 2025. Trump tariffs in China. The China garment factories face a tipping point after new tariffs. The New York Times. Trump tariffs in China hit by trade war. The China garment industry refuses to stop hustling. The New York Times. Trump tariffs in United States opinion. Welcome to the sad new world of a weak U.S. dollar. The New York Times. Trump tariffs in auto industry and the used car business. The Trump tariffs are already straining this Oklahoma used car business. The New York Times. Trump tariffs and Warren Buffett. Why the Warren Buffett departure from Berkshire Hathaway matters. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous actions. Donald Jr. and Eric Trump pursue new deals that would enrich President Trump. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous opinion. It is not just Trump, the presidency has become too powerful. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous. Rwanda in early talks with U.S. to take expelled migrants. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous. The Fed is not likely to cut rates proactively despite economic concerns. Here is why. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous. Trump says he will put 100% tariff on movies made outside the U.S. The New York Times. Musk in Texas. Elon Musk has 16-foot wall in the feud with his Texas neighbors. The New York Times. Musk in Texas inside Starbase. Elon the Musk New City. The New York Times. United States. Is this the late night TV last gasp? The New York Times. United States and Republicans. Senate and House Republicans in Congress use obscure law to roll back Biden-era regulations. The New York Times. New York and nonprofits. How New York City routinely fails to pay the nonprofits it relies on. The New York Times. El Salvador opinion. The world is finally seeing how dangerous President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador really is. The New York Times. Colombia as U.S. support vanishes. A Colombia post-war peace teachers. The New York Times. Europe and scientific and medical researchers from the United States as Trump targets researchers. Europe makes a pitch to attract scientists. The New York Times. Spain. Cable theft in Spain disrupts strange travel for thousands. Officials say. The New York Times. France and crypto crime. French police rescue kidnapped father of crypto entrepreneur. The New York Times. Hungary. Cardinal Erdo of Hungary is a favorite of conservatives to become pope. The New York Times. Italy. Survivors urge cardinals to discuss abuse crisis and choosing next pope. The New York Times. Mideast oil prices slide further on OPEC plans to increase supply. The New York Times. 3 Oklahoma. Lawton. At this humble used car lot. Tariffs are beginning to sting. A used car dealer is trying to hold his car business together as President. The Trump tariffs drive up costs and drive his customers deeper into crisis. The man in his repair bay. His inventory and sales have been dropping. Cited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. May 4, 2025. I have no idea how I'm ever going to pay for this radiator, she said. We will give you some time, Antonio said. And what about my regular payments? I am behind already and now I have got nothing. I know, Antonio said. I feel bad for you. We will absorb what we can while you get back on your feet. That could take a while, Taylor said. She looked down at his desk for a moment and wiped her eyes. I might have to give the car back, she said. Antonio reached into a bin on his desk and found the keys to her Avenger. These were the margins that determined their places in the American economy. A slight price increase, a brief delay, another deal that neither side could afford. We want to keep working with you, Antonio said. He walked her outside to the Avenger and handed her the keys. She turned the ignition and the engine stirred to life. Okay, he said, you are good to go for Nebraska. Why the Warren Buffett departure matters. Cited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. May 5, 2025. Yes, he made lots of money, but the closely watched investor amassed a following by being a conscience of capitalism, and his exit raises questions about what is next for his company. Buffett rarely relied on the legions of bankers, accountants and consultants that are standard advisors to large corporations. It allowed him to move with remarkable speed and decisiveness. Abel will have to work hard to earn even some of that latitude, and under him Berkshire is likely to operate with more guardrails, but there is speculation that Buffett will remain chairman for some period, which could afford Abel more freedom as he grows into the top job eventually. Howard Buffett. The Buffett elder son is expected to take over as non-executive chairman. And there's the question of what happens to the Berkshire annual meeting itself, which each year draws tens of thousands to Omaha for the chance to hear from Buffett. The event has created a powerful halo effect for the company and its stock, for the city too, and for Berkshire-owned businesses like Netjets Nebraska, Furniture Mart and the jeweler Borshine. Will Buffett continue to speak at it? Will shareholders continue to make the pilgrimage if he does not? As the crowd filed out of the CHI Health Center past the booths of Berkshire-owned businesses promoting their wares, there was the palpable sense of the end of an era. 5 Trump says he will put 100% tariff on movies made outside U.S., declaring foreign film production a national security threat. The president said he had asked his top trade official to start the process of imposing a tax on Hollywood. Cited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 non-profit organization. The New York Times. May 5, 2025. Trump said he would impose a 100% tariff on movies produced outside the United States, proclaiming in a social media post on Sunday that the issue posed a national security threat. Trump said he had authorized Jamieson Greer, the United States Trade Representative, to begin the process of taxing any and all movies coming into our country that are produced in foreign lands. Trump added this is a concerted effort by other nations and therefore a national security threat. The latest economic impact report from the Motion Picture Association showed that the film industry generated a positive U.S. balance of trade for every major market in the world. Sometimes the cost of shipping props and people overseas ends up costing studios more than they hope to save with tax credits, but more often producers say the cost of working in California is prohibitive. Peak streaming is over, fewer people are going to movie theaters, and studios no longer get dollars from DVD sales. Governor Gavin Newsom has pushed to more than double the available funding for the California Tax Incentive Program under pressure from constituents and several coalitions that formed after the recent wildfires in Los Angeles and the surrounding area. California lawmakers have also put forward bills that would increase its film tax credits. Will not you be my neighbor? No thanks. Elon Musk residents of an upscale enclave outside Austin, Texas learned the hard way what it is like when a multibillionaire moves into the mansion next door. Some of them have started a ruckus over it. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, May 5, 2025. At first, residents of the upscale cul-de-sac in West Lake Hills, Texas did not know who had moved into the 6,900 square foot 6-bedroom mansion next door. Then construction workers arrived to erect a 16-foot chain-link fence around the $6 million property, which is one of 4 homes on the leafy street. They also installed an outward-facing camera next to a fleet of cars, many of them Teslas, began parking on the street 3 times a day. A shift change signaled security personnel coming and going at the house. Once the driver of a passing car shouted late at night that he was looking for a party. The E-House of No. One liked the commotion or the traffic or the keypad activated gate opening and closing for workers in cars at all hours. So even when they learned through word of mouth that their new neighbor was Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, that did not stop some of them from grousing to the city of West Lake Hills about his mansion. The complaints have since escalated into an uproar over city ordinances, permits and exceptions known as variances, so much so that the matter of the Musk house landed in a contentious zoning and planning commission meeting last month. The debate is headed next to a West Lake Hills City Council session scheduled for May 14. If you follow him at all in the news, he is always guilty of building stuff and then asking for permission later. One commissioner who was not identified in the recording said she could not believe West Lake Hills staff had recommended that the homeowner receive any exceptions. I am astounded the staff is putting forth any kind of suggestions. We been based on who is asking, she said. The decision of the Planning Commission does not end the process. At the upcoming West Lake Hills City Council meeting, members must decide whether to stick with the recommendation of the commissioners on the Musk mansion. If the City Council votes against him, Musk could sue the town, and if that does not work, and given his track record in backing candidates, there is always the next local election. 7 California, Los Angeles. Is this the late night TV last gasp? Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, May 5, 2025. The talk shows are one of the few TV genres that have not made the leap to streaming. Their future may instead look a lot like a podcast studio. The Netflix vice president of stand-up and comedy formats said in an interview that the company had not initially been looking or aspiring to do another talk show. It was more interested in being in the John Mulaney business than in talk shows generally, he said, adding John is so singular. The first season of the show, called Everybody Is in LA, ran for all of 6 episodes but was a huge critical hit. Netflix went ahead and ordered 12 episodes for this year and changed the name to Everybody Is Live. Although the show loosely follows one theme, planning a funeral, borrowing money and getting fired, Mulaney is not following in the footsteps of Colbert or John Oliver and dedicating much of the show to the current political news cycle. I was kind of like, what type of show do I want to watch? Mulaney said, and it is not because the ground is well covered by great people. Topically, the performance of Everybody Is Live could be a key piece of evidence to determine whether streaming executives will keep taking a stab at the format or stop altogether. Mulaney strongly suggested that he would be interested in doing another season. It is not clear how the show is performing, but critical attention has been more muted this season. The first episode appeared in the Netflix Daily 10 most watched TV series in the United States, but the show has not returned in the subsequent 7 weeks. Netflix Netflix was not prepared, however, to announce anything yet about a potential third season. Every show we have ever done we want more people to watch, he said. 8 United States Republicans in Congress use obscure law to roll back Biden-era regulations. As GOP lawmakers have largely ceded power to Trump, they are also pushing the bounds of a little-known statute to undo federal rules and potentially undermining the filibuster. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, May 3, 2025. As Trump moves unilaterally to slash the federal bureaucracy and upend long-standing policies, Republicans in Congress have embarked on a spree of deregulation using an obscure law to quietly but steadily chip away at Biden-era rules they say are hurting businesses and consumers. In recent weeks, the GOP has pushed through a flurry of legislation to cancel regulations on matters large and small, from oversight of firms that emit toxic pollutants to energy efficiency requirements for walk-in freezers and water heaters. To do so, they are employing a little-known 1996 law, the Congressional Review Act, that allows lawmakers to reverse recently adopted federal regulations with a simple majority vote in both chambers. It is a strategy they used in 2017 during the Trump first term and are leaning on again as they work to find ways to steer around Democratic opposition and make the most of their governing trifecta of the House, the Senate and the White House. But this time Republicans are testing the limits of the law in a way that could vastly expand its use and undermine the filibuster, the Senate rule that effectively requires 60 votes to move forward with any major legislation, because resolutions of disapproval under the Congressional Review Act need only a majority vote. They are some of the only legislation that can avoid a filibuster in the Senate. This allows them to circumvent the partisan gridlock that stands in the way of most significant bills. Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon and Representative Maxine Waters of California, both Democrats, have proposed a bill that would make staff cut plans of a federal agency, including the mass layoffs known as reductions in force undertaken by the Trump administration, subject to congressional review. The measure would also require agencies to justify proposed staff cuts, quantify the impact on employees and agency operations, and present any alternatives. The agency considered it has no realistic chance of surviving the Republican-controlled Congress and would certainly be vetoed by Trump. Mass firings are an attack on the separation of powers, Merkley said in an interview. These have very big impacts on the provision of services to Americans, and Congress should have a voice in that. Merkley criticized Republicans for using the review law to try to attack the EPA waivers for California, arguing that such a move constituted a nuclear option aimed at carving out an entirely new set of policy matters from the Senate filibuster. If the Republicans want to expand the Congressional Review Act, they should do it through legislation, not through a bogus reinterpretation. Merkley said, "You want to expand the scope? Propose a bill. That is what I am doing." 9 Europe makes a pitch to attract scientists shunned by the US. The European leaders are hoping to benefit as the Trump cuts support for research and threatens universities such as Harvard and Columbia with the freezing of federal funds. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, May 5, 2025. President Emmanuel Macron of France speaks at a podium beside a French flag and an EU flag. A backdrop behind him reads "Choose Europe for Science." President Emmanuel Macron of France. Over the longer term, the European Commission, the executive arm of the European Union, plans to double grants for researchers relocating to Europe and to enshrine freedom of scientific research into a law called the European Research Area Act. The first priority is to ensure that science in Europe remains open and free. That is our calling card, Ms. von der Leyen said. As threats rise across the world, Europe will not compromise on its principles. Europe must remain the home of free academic and scientific values. The Trump attack on science and threats to universities were the main impetus for the conference, which was attended by government ministers and prominent researchers from across Europe. Increasingly, the United States is seen as a strategic adversary, with the opening of doors to American researchers and scientists viewed as an effective long-term response to that challenge. The Macron message to scientists, particularly women, he said, was this: "If you love freedom, come help us to remain free." He announced that his government would dedicate $113 million to welcoming foreign researchers, promising that they would not replace European scientists. Alarms in Europe began sounding when the Trump administration slashed jobs and froze science grants at leading American institutions as part of cost-cutting measures. European dismay increased as the U.S. government attacked diversity programs and attempted to dictate to universities who they can admit and hire learned which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue. In the words of the president of Harvard, 10 Spain cable theft in Spain disrupts train travel for thousands. Officials say the Spanish transport minister said a serious act of sabotage had brought some service to a halt, delaying service into Monday. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, May 5, 2025. A serious act of sabotage disrupted high-speed rail lines in Spain, the Spanish transport minister said on Sunday, affecting thousands of travelers as transit operators worked to restore normal service. The disruption was caused by thefts of cable parts on the line between Madrid and Seville, said the transport minister. The cable thefts were not the only reason for the widespread disruptions, which affected more than 10,000 passengers after the thefts. A train also snagged, dragging the overhead power line. He wrote in Spanish, it is the latest major disruption for Spain, which is still reeling from an unexplained electricity outage last week. By Monday morning, Puente said in a post on X that high-speed rail service had been restored to 70% of its normal service and that it should be back to normal by the afternoon. Headlines. The New York Times, May 4, 2025. Trump tariffs opinion. There's a way forward. How to defeat the Trump power grab. The New York Times. Trump tariffs opinion. Democrats have been at war with oil barons for far too long. The New York Times. Trump tariffs opinion. These thinkers set the stage for Trump the all-powerful. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous. Trump says he wants Alcatraz restored as a prison. The New York Times. Trump tariffs. Trump says I do not know when asked about due process and upholding Constitution. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous. The Trump climate claims fact-checking. The president who follows science. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous. Army plans a big parade that could fall on the Trump birthday. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous. Justice Department investigates Minnesota prosecutor office over race policy. The New York Times. Trump miscellaneous. Laid off. This newsletter doubles as a support group. The New York Times. Trump and Veterans Administration. The Trump via squeezes mental health care in crowded offices, raising privacy concerns. The New York Times. United States and transportation. A scenic tour of red tape tracking the slowest high-speed train in the country. The New York Times. United States and medicine. He was sure dialysis had caused his belly pain, but why? The New York Times. COVID misinformation and Kennedy Jr. How to detect the age-old traditions of folklore in the COVID-19 misinformation of today. In April 2020, Alabama. This Alabama city faces a culture war with its public library at the center. The New York Times. New York. When taxpayers fund shows like Blue Bloods and SNL, does it pay off? The New York Times. California. Where would Hollywood find its guillotines or payphones without them? The New York Times. Nebraska. Warren Buffett. Highlights of the life of Warren Buffett. The New York Times. Nebraska. Warren Buffett. How Warren Buffett changed the way investors thought of investing. The New York Times. Australia. What effect did Trump have on the Australian election? The New York Times. Australia and Canada. New trend in global elections. The anti-Trump bump. The New York Times. Ukraine. More American air defense is on the way to help Ukraine. The New York Times. Romania election tip to Trumpist candidate. Romanian nationalist wins first round of presidential voting. The New York Times. Israel. 80 years after Dachau concentration camp liberation. Witnesses remember. The New York Times. 11 United States ever worried about being laid off? Read this. Federal workers, Google employees and newspaper editors have opened up about losing their jobs in the newsletter Laid Off. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. May 3, 2025. A California man was laid off for the first time in 2001. He was laid off 3 more times over the course of his career, he said, and wrote a book about his experiences that he self-published in February. In addition to writing about jobs he has lost, Jaffe has been reading the layoff stories of others in Laid Off, a new Substack newsletter. A support group like this for laid off people has always been needed, he said. A formerly laid off woman who is now consulting and whose laid off feature was published in April likes how the newsletter lets readers hear from the people. She added, I am tired of companies being able to direct us and lead stories. As humans we have that power, and I like to hear from people like, hey, I walked in, it was awkward, things were awkward that day, say this is why they told me they are doing it, because no company is ever going to say that 12 United States via mental health care staff crowded into federal buildings raise patient privacy alarms. Clinicians at the Department of Veterans Affairs say the Trump return to office order is forcing many of them to work from makeshift spaces where sensitive conversations can be overheard. At a VA clinic in Oakland, mental health professionals are sharing call center style offices such as a mailroom where supervisors had the cubbyhole mailboxes removed to install 2 desks. Clinicians at the Department of Veterans Affairs say the Trump return to office order is forcing many of them to work from makeshift spaces where sensitive conversations can be overheard. Accepted by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, May 4, 2025. In a Boston VA hospital, 6 social workers are conducting phone and telehealth visits with veterans from a single crowded room. Clinicians say Kansas City providers are planning patient care while facing each other across narrow cafeteria-style tables in a large open space, according to staff members. And in South Florida, psychiatric nurses have been treating veterans with mental health conditions in a hallway near a bathroom, sitting down with them in a makeshift medical bay. Jury-rig data filing cabinets and a translucent screen. People walking by can hear everything that is going on, said a male acute care psychiatric nurse at the Miami VA hospital and director of the local chapter of the National Nurses United Union, referring to the patient intake set up in a VA outpatient facility in Homestead, outside Miami. The nurses are triaging these patients, asking standard questions. Do you feel like harming yourself or others? How long have you been feeling suicidal? Do you have a plan to harm yourself? It is very personal stuff. People walking by can hear everything that is going on. A return to office order to a woman who is a VA worker, she said, left her little choice but to retire early. 6 weeks ago she began telling patients that she was terminating their treatment. They are mostly veterans who return from war with undiagnosed PTSD and struggle with addiction. She said by her estimate, a quarter of them have already made suicide attempts, and it is unlikely that her position will be filled after her departure. She said termination is difficult anyway. She said a psychiatrist and the patient, it is an oddly intimate relationship. Nearly all of them have responded with hurt and confusion. Their sessions were virtual, so why did it matter where she was? She reminds them of the executive order that Trump signed on January 20, phasing out remote work for federal employees, one of his fiercest official acts. This was not an easy decision, she said. It is not the right one for my patients, and it is one I am really feeling forced to make. 13 United States explanation from 2020 of why the myth, legend or rumor that MAGA still circulates that COVID-19 vaccines are harmful still lives on among certain groups. RAWSEP View Folklore is one explanation for the existence of Trump, MAGA and Kennedy Jr. MAHA. COVID-19 misinformation, or the more likely explanation could be that COVID-19 misinformation is just your basic Trump 1.0 lie in 2020 and your basic Trump 2.0 lie in 2025. From the article titled How to Detect the Age-Old Traditions of Folklore in COVID-19 Misinformation of Today in April 2020, accepted by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Smithsonian Magazine, April 14, 2020. On the morning of March 16, I received an email from a colleague that contained an urgent warning of a pending COVID-19 nationwide quarantine. Insider knowledge from one of my sons suggests a nationwide 2-week everything closes down quarantine may be coming to be announced either tomorrow night or the night after, so go to the grocery store. A dad of a friend is in healthcare and met with the president. As grim as much of this coronavirus folklore may be, folklorists also trace the humor shared among folk groups, especially in times of anxiety. A folkloristic analysis of the 2 messages above will recognize certain patterns and conventions that mark them as folklore. The attribution to a dad of a friend. Dad and some of my military friends, who are what folklorists call folks or friends of a friend. Folklore always appears with some slight variation because it never comes from a single authoritative source but rather is transmitted more informally from person to person or group to group, nowadays often via text messages or social media. Folklorists would classify these 2 messages as rumors because they provide plausible unofficial information and because they emerge during a real-world situation of potential danger. Folklorists recognize the very real dangers of spreading misinformation, but we also understand how folklore functions for members of folk groups, especially when those groups feel threatened. Like all examples of folklore, rumors seek to inform and to build solidarity and cohesion among members of folk groups as those groups seek to maintain their identity reality in the modern world. The difference between legends and rumors is that rumors are shorter non-story-like bits of information without an established plot, while legends tend to be longer with setting, plot, climax and denouement. Legends also differ from myths, which is defined by folklorists take place before the beginning of time and before the world as we know it was created. Not surprisingly, legends are also emerging during the current coronavirus crisis. One that was shared on Publor listserv for public folklorists is that criminal gangs are taking advantage of people trying to remain safe at home. They are sending crying children to residential homes if the door opens, because who can resist a crying child? The gangs rush in to commit unspeakable mayhem. One of our primary concerns will remain constant to better understand how our cultural expressions, be they stories, customs, text messages or memes, may function as folklore by informing, by validating and reinforcing the beliefs and conduct of a particular group, by building solidarity and cohesion among members of that group, and even by providing some entertainment at this vitally serious moment in world history. Headlines: The Guardian, May 5, 2025. Trump miscellaneous MAGA media mob meet the new right-wing faces in the White House briefing room. Trump administration. The Guardian. Trump miscellaneous mass resignations at Labor Department threaten workers in U.S. and overseas, warn staff, as more cuts loom. Trump administration. The Guardian. Trump miscellaneous. Trump says he will reopen Alcatraz prison for the most ruthless offenders. U.S. prisons. The Guardian. Trump miscellaneous. The Trump movie tariffs are designed to destroy the international film industry. Movies. The Guardian. Musk steps back. Experts say Doge cuts have harmed government services. Elon Musk. The Guardian. Australia concerns about his capability. Liberal senator launches extraordinary attack on Angus Taylor amid search for new leader. Liberal Party. The Guardian. Italy. Pope Francis leaves mixed legacy on role of women in Catholic Church. Catholicism. The Guardian. Romania far right first round win of Romanian presidential election raises prospect of EU disruption. Romania. The Guardian. Russia. Explosive toys and cosmetics. The story behind the DHL parcels blot. Russia. The Guardian. 14 United States MAGA media mob meet the new right-wing faces in the White House briefing room. A banjo player and a black MAGA influencer among others now attend Trump press briefings. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, May 5, 2025. A disgraced ultra-conservative banjo player ousted from his Grammy-winning band. A far-right conspiracy theorist with alleged ties to Russia. TikTok creator known as MAGA Malfoy for his resemblance to the Harry Potter character, and an extremist social media influencer once banned from Twitter for posting a video depicting abuse of a child. These are just some of the new media personalities courted by the White House to take part in a series of alternative briefings championed by Trump Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. An extraordinary gallery of Trump promoting characters has paraded through the West Wing in recent days, answering the Leavitt call for independent journalists and influencers to attend her press gatherings. Some of their fawning softball or otherwise baffling questions have provoked derision and concern, while the topics predictably have covered a wide range of propaganda, conspiracy and other extremist talking points. Here are some of the highlights. 1. Winston Marshall since quitting Mumford & Sons, the double Grammy-winning folk rock band he co-founded 4 years ago following his controversial endorsement of a book of a conservative journalist, guitarist and banjoist Marshall has found his place in the right-wing ecosystem. The 37-year-old British son of GB News co-owner and hedge fund tycoon Sir Paul Marshall now hosts his own podcast, The Winston Marshall Show, in which he discusses politics with like-minded guests. For his 14,000 subscribers, Tim Pool, the host of several conservative podcasts, was linked last year to a U.S. content creation company the Justice Department said was paid almost $10 million by Russian state media operatives to publish videos promoting the interests and agenda of Moscow. 3. Link Lauren, bleached blonde and with a striking resemblance to the Harry Potter character Draco Malfoy. Lauren is a previously unknown musician and content creator who served as a social media advisor to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. during the failed presidential campaign last year as the new health secretary. His recent wild claims include informing his 875,000 TikTok followers that the Biden administration was responsible for countless suicides. For Dominic McGee under the pseudonym Dom Luker. Election denier McGee was booted briefly from X then Twitter in 2023 for posting a video depicting child abuse, but allowed back on at the insistence of X owner Elon Musk. 5. Erin Wexler, billing herself as just a crazy non-lib girl in a crazy lib world. MAGA newcomer Wexler claims to have grown up as one of few conservatives on the outskirts of the very blue New York City. 6 Rogan O'Hanley, better known by his alter ego DC Drano O'Hanley, is a former entertainment attorney with a long history as a commentator on the political right. He was among 15 right-wing influencers given early access in February to what the White House said was key new evidence in the case of the late pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, but which many observers said fell way short of the explosive revelations they promised. 15 United States Elon Musk has Musk steps back. Experts say Doge cuts have harmed government services. The billionaire fired thousands of workers, but savings are minimal and offset by degradation of services. Critics say it's substituted by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 non-profit organization. The Guardian, May 5, 2025. As Elon Musk steps back from his role heading the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, Doge. Many experts on government operations complain that Doge has done nothing to improve the quality of services the government provides to the American people. Doge is not offering any solid claims that it has improved services in any way, said a professor of public policy at the University of Michigan. Rather, it has made the quality of some government services worse. Musk, the richest man in the world, was appointed to run the government efficiency drive by Trump in January, and as a special government employee was barred from working for more than 180 days for the administration. He also has his own business to attend to. Illustration of worker at desk with large crevasse behind him. Mass resignations at Labor Department threaten workers in U.S. and overseas. One staff as more cuts loom, but on his way out of the White House, Musk has boasted that Doge has achieved $150 billion in savings. Although many budget experts question the accuracy of that figure, Musk has repeatedly made exaggerated and erroneous claims about savings which are a fraction of the Musk goal of $1 trillion in cuts. The Musk claim of $150 billion in savings is a vast to overestimate because it fails to include the considerable costs of the Doge moves, said Steyer. The Steyer Group estimates that as a result of firings, rehirings, severance pay, paid leave and lost productivity involving more than 100,000 workers, the Doge maneuvers will cost taxpayers $135 billion this fiscal year. And several public policy experts said the increased wait times and hassles the public will face due to the Doge cuts should also be subtracted from the $150 billion. Moynihan said Musk has precisely the wrong vision for someone tasked with making government more efficient. His vision is that there is no way that government employees can produce anything of value, Moynihan said. So the idea of tools that makes government services better is completely alien to the Musk mindset. I think he believes that nothing public employees do has any real value, that they are not capable employees and therefore cutting them will do no harm. Moynihan added it is a vision that does not understand what public services are, why they exist and how they benefit people. Moynihan faulted Musk for gutting one of the main efforts of the government to use technology to improve services and efficiency. He also criticized Musk for helping kill Direct File, a free and user-friendly way for people to report and file their taxes. The president of the AFL-CIO, the main U.S. union federation, said the Doge cuts will hurt workers. She pointed to the sharp cuts at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, saying that that agency, for instance, does important research to ensure that the personal protective equipment of firefighters is safe as possible. There is this notion that Doge is just cutting line items on a spreadsheet. It is hurting real lives and real people. A woman at the Yale Budget Lab warned of another downside to the Doge cuts. Part of what government does is mitigate risk, she said. Take food safety. Government inspectors decrease the risk that you will get listeria or salmonella, but when they reduce the number of food inspectors, will you get listeria or salmonella tomorrow? No. Will it probably increase the chances of people getting listeria and salmonella over the next 5 years? Yes. 16 Romania The Alliance for the Union of Romanians. Hour of George Simion has grown from an anti-vax movement into the second largest party in Romania. Far-right first round win of Romanian presidential election raises prospect of EU disruption. Trump admirer George Simion opposes Ukraine military aid and calls for a Melonisation of Europe. RAWSEP View AUR growing from an anti-vax party to a MAGA-esque party shows the connection between Trump influence and anti-science and anti-vax movements. Subsetted statement by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 non-profit organization, The Guardian, May 5, 2025. A far-right Trump admirer who opposes military aid to Ukraine has decisively won the first round of the presidential election in Romania. Rerun. New final results show raising the prospect of another disruptive nationalist joining the club of EU leaders with 99.99% of votes counted on Monday. George Simion, 38, who sports MAGA caps, pushes a sovereignist socially conservative agenda and has called for the Melonisation, referring to the far-right Prime Minister of Italy, scored 40.96%. That was almost double the score of the second-placed candidate Nicuzar than the centrist mayor of Bucharest, and higher than pre-election polls had predicted. The two will face each other in a second-round runoff due on 18th of May. Dance quaint into the second round with 20.99%, less than a percentage point more than Trine Antonescu, a pro-European former senator backed by the ruling Social Democratic Party PSD and the center-right National Liberal Party PNL. The president of Romania has a semi-executive role with considerable powers over foreign policy, national security, defense spending and judicial appointments. They also represent the country on the international stage and can veto important EU votes. A Simion victory could lead to Romania, which shares a border with Ukraine and is a member of both the EU and NATO, veering away from the mainstream path and becoming another disruptive force within the EU alongside Hungary and Slovakia. It would also be welcomed by conservative nationalists in Europe and beyond, including senior Trump administration figures such as the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who accused Bucharest of denying democracy after the original ballot was cancelled. That vote last November was won by Călin Georgescu, a far-right Moscow-friendly independent, but was annulled by the top court of Romania after declassified intelligence documents revealed an alleged Russian influence operation. Georgescu, who denies any wrongdoing, was later placed under investigation on counts including misreporting campaign finances, misuse of digital technology and promoting fascist groups. In March he was barred from standing in the rerun. Simion promised on Sunday to make Georgescu prime minister either through a referendum, early elections or forming a new government coalition if he won. Far-right groups have 35% of parliamentary seats after elections held in December. Georgescu, 63, called the vote rerun a fraud orchestrated by those who have made deceit the only state policy, but said he voted on Sunday to acknowledge the power of democracy, the power of the vote that frightens and terrifies the system. Simion denies his policies are far-right but has described his party as natural allies of Trump and promised an alliance of EU countries in the spirit of MAGA. He has frequently criticized Russia but consistently opposed military aid to Ukraine. To date, Romania has donated a Patriot air defense battery to Kyiv, is training Ukrainian fighter pilots, and has enabled the export of 30 million tons of Ukrainian grain through its Black Sea port of Constanța since the Russian invasion. 17 Bosnia arrest explosive toys and cosmetics. The story behind the DHL parcels plot. Exclusive account reveals previously unreported details and insights into how the Kremlin sabotage campaign played out on the ground in the multinational effort to track down the network behind it. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 non-profit organization. The Guardian, May 5, 2025. On a frost in November 2024 morning, a man with staggered exhausted into a small guest house on the outskirts of Bosanska Krupa, quaint Bosnian border town. Alexander Bezrukovic has been on the run for more than 3 months, pursued by European security services who accuse him of working for the Russian military intelligence agency. The GRU Bezrukovic, 44, had set out from Croatia on foot 2 days earlier, navigating dense Balkan forests and rugged hills to cross into Bosnia illicitly. As evening arrived, Bezrukovic messaged his wife promising her that they would soon be reunited in Russia, and contacted his friend to finalize his plans for getting back home using new forged papers and a flight from neighboring Serbia. The arrest of Bezrukovic was part of a Polish-led operation targeting a suspected Russian-backed criminal network. The cell is accused of sending parcels containing camouflaged explosives on cargo planes across Europe, triggering fires at 3 locations. Polish prosecutors believe Bezrukovic was part of a plot to send shipments with explosives to the US and Canada, a brazen plan that would have marked a major escalation of a sabotage campaign that Western security officials believe Moscow has unleashed over the past 3 years. parcels across Europe. Western security officials believe the exploding parcels could have led to a plane crash and mass casualties. When intelligence about the alleged plot reached Washington, it caused so much alarm that top officials in the Joe Biden administration had called their Russian counterparts to demand that Vladimir Putin call it off. The account began offering courier jobs paying hundreds of dollars per assignment. A close associate of Bezrukov, who supplied cars for the operation, disclosed new details of the parcel shipments. The packages looked very random: toys from China and cosmetics. Polish officials would later discover that at least one of the parcels sent by the Bezrukov group concealed a homemade incendiary device hidden among the toys and reportedly crafted from a cocktail of chemicals including highly reactive magnesium. I am sure he did not do it for the motherland, he just wanted easy money. He has been a criminal his whole life. One thing is certain, he added, if the Russian services continue their sabotage offensive, there are sure to be more arrests. There will be others who will want to make some money, and someone will be there to take advantage of that.
Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Hi, I am Leone. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your neighborhood epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times. One introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses. It is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View Purple Air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.